Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Roundup, everybody. This is a Tuesday edition, which means I'm looking at campaigns that funded Friday through Monday. And it has been a light weekend for launches. There weren't that many launches. Once I whittled it down to the two that I wanted to share with you, well, I was left with two. And even those, I think, are not great choices. They're probably not going to end up funding, but I think they're at least worth a look. I think they deserve us looking at them. So we'll do that. And then in the back half of the Tuesday videos, I talk about all the games that I've played over the last period. And I actually have 6 games to talk to you about today. However, I'm going to give them all scores, and all of the scores for all of these games, for me personally, are a little meh. So it feels like it is a video of meh tonight. But as always, the video is tabbed, so if you want to go to any specific content, you can just scroll over the play bar and go directly to that game or that campaign. And the 2 campaigns that launched over the weekend are linked in the description of the video. So if you go down into the description, right near the name, there'll be a link. You can just click on that if the campaign interests you, and it'll take you right there. Without any further ado, let's look at these 2 games that launched over the weekend. It's got a funding goal of $8,700. They're currently at $1,500. This one launched on, I think, Friday, either Friday or Saturday. So it's been up for a few days. And it hasn't made 2/3 of its funding goal in its first 48 hours, or even, double that, which means it's not likely to fund. And if we look down a little further, we can see it's designed by this guy, Cosmo Schroeder. This is his first project. And he is a rocket scientist, web programmer, ultimate player, game designer, raised 3 board gaming kids, and now working on the grandkids. So that's all really cool. I like personal stories like that. And I like to see people out there pursuing their dreams. But the net result of this is just kind of it may be well made. It sounds like he's a big board gamer. So hopefully the design here is solid enough, but it's it's not rocket science from the rocket scientist. It's not anything that new. In fact, I think it was today that the designer of Catan just died, and it looks very reminiscent of Catan, which is okay, but that also means that it's nothing, new. I mean, Catan, while it transformed our hobby and made it into this hobby that's now taken off in new ways that it wouldn't have without Catan, Catan itself, that design is a bit clunky and old. I mean, things have grown off the shoulders of that, stood on the shoulders of that design, and board games have come a long way since Catan. And this looks like kind of a throwback to it. So as you can see, it's just very homespun, very homegrown here. It looks, the colors are nice. It's got typical meeples and wooden resources and stuff, but it just doesn't look like anything really new. Now, if we go over here, we can see the listing on Board Game Geek. Cosmo Schroeder is the designer here, and yeah, this is his first game. And Turret Games, which I believe is his company, this is probably their first, it's their first published game as well. Now, if we go over here and we look at the categories, we can see this is a medieval game with territory building, and the mechanisms include action points, endgame bonuses, hexagon grid, hidden victory points, modular board, pick up and deliver, take that, and a progressive turn order. And let's just, does it say worker placement? It doesn't. So I guess it is worker management in the sense that you're probably juggling meeples as a resource in itself, but not worker placement. And it says here in the description, Indio is a Euro-style board game for 2 to 4 players aged 14 and up. It takes 60 to 90 minutes to play, during which you'll be using workers to collect resources, modify the production of the land, and build structures. Your goal is to have the most victory points and be crowned the ruler of Indio. Game takes place over 7 rounds. Okay. And let's just take a quick look back at it. I mean, we've already kind of looked at it. We see what it is. It's just this very kind of colorful yet, you know, generic game, generic in the sense that we've seen this before. And it actually looks very Catan-like to me. Now, here's another problem. Because we're a small operation, we're currently only planning to ship our games to the US and Canada. Shipping fees will be added to your order after the campaign closes. And there are no shipping estimates, which for me is always an indicator not to back. I think in this day and age, you have to have shipping estimates. You owe that to your backers to give them shipping estimates. Even if at the end of the day, you have to modify those and change those a little bit, you can't not have shipping estimates. So for me, that's just a huge reason not to back it, and we already know that it's not going to fund, and it looks like nothing new under the sun, although I do like the colors. So we see here that the base game is $75, and then they have a big box, which will include this expansion called Renaissance, and that is $99. But of course, we don't have shipping estimates for either one. Now, they are planning to ship the game out in June 2023. And if you did want to try to jump on this and pledge it in the hopes that, you know, it increases its funding by leaps and bounds, the campaign will end on April the 20th. Now, the other game that we're looking at is called Curio Black 1962. This just launched yesterday, and they have a funding goal of $8,000. They're at not quite $1,500, so it's a similar story. It's probably not going to fund. And let's take a look at it on Board Game Geek. It's designed by this guy, Nicholas Levers, published by NL Games, which is obviously his company. And again, it's a first-time designer, first-time publisher. Now, this is a game with deduction, negotiation, political themes, and spy secret agents. As mechanisms, it's got action, event, cooperative game, kill, steal, and memory. And it's described here as a high-stakes undercover auction game lasting 15 minutes. And if we go over here and we look at this, well, first of all, this campaign will end on May the 4th. But if we look at this, I will say that I like the kind of retro style. I mean, it looks like a game that could have been published in the 60s or something. And I do like that throwback design, and I like the simplicity of the cards. And they describe here how to play. Choose an individual or team mode. You've got an event phase where you're going to be moving this token across, and then players will be bidding. And then there's a turn action phase. And again, with this kind of like retro art here, they describe, you know, the various phases of gameplay. It's a pretty simple game. Negotiation, bidding, auction game. And there's, you know, not that much to see on the campaign itself. And the biggest problem here is that, again, I'm not sure if they actually say this or not, but there's no shipping estimates, which to me is a huge problem. I think somewhere in here they say that they'll be, you know, similar to the other campaign, they'll be billing shipping and figuring out shipping estimates after the campaign is over, which is not good. It's a big no-no in my mind. But again, if you're curious to pledge this one, it's $50 for the standard game. There's a deluxe package for $85, which will include some little extras, a vintage poster, a black bag, Curio black bag, and a Mariana token. Now, you can buy these things as add-ons. Let's see, they're listed here. So there's the tote bag. There's the vintage poster. And here's this token, which I actually think is pretty cool. Looks like a secret agent ring or something. But if you just wanted this, you could just add this on for $7. And then down here in the luxury package, this just adds on a loyalty card, a velvet game bag, and a signed copy of the game. So, you know, again, they won't take your money unless they fund, and they're probably not going to fund. So those are the two campaigns that launched over the weekend that I thought were of note. There were a few other campaigns that also launched, but those were even less of note than these two. So it was just a very light weekend for launches. Now, before I wrap the video, I would like to talk about the 6 games that I played in this period. Now this is a game that I've talked about previously, and I backed it because I really like Aeon's End. That game, along with Thunderstone Quest, is one of my 2 favorite deck builders. And Astro Knights is essentially a reskinning of it with space heroes. So instead of defending lands, in a fantasy setting, you are going to be defending planets from big alien space creatures and using these space knights. And much like Aeon's End, you're going to be juggling cards that allow you to buy more cards and cards that allow you to attack. And you're going to be trying to decide whether you should be spending your attacks on the big boss's minions or the big boss himself. And all of this happening while you're trying to save this homeworld, in this case, from dying. And the Kickstarter came with, gosh, maybe a dozen different heroes that you can play. I think 5 different bosses and 7 or 8 different homeworlds. So there's a lot of variability when you mix and match those things. And in the past, I've talked about the fact that the accessory pack came with some promo cards and then some counters, dice counters, D10s. And to me, the D10s felt like a waste because you already had health dials for the boss and the homeworld. But I played it with my friend this weekend, and he looked at me and he said, hey, these D10s are supposed to be used for the minions. And so you use the dice to track the minions' health, and then you don't have to get rid of, you don't have to manage all the tokens. And it made gameplay so much smoother and nicer. And so I do have to agree with my friend Ryan that I think I've seen the light, and I think there is a reason for those D10s in the accessory pack, and I'm very glad to have them. Now, all of that said, I think I still do plan on selling this game. And I'm going to go ahead and give this game a rating. I'm going to rate it a 7.5 because I did enjoy our time with it. We beat one of the hardest bosses, and it was right down to the wire, and we had a really good time with it. And I do want to go through and play the other heroes and fight the other bosses and defend the other homeworlds. But the thing is, I like Aeon's End more, and I already have all of the content for Aeon's End. And I have a board game collection that is growing massive. So I just don't think I have room in my collection for a reskinning of a game that I already have with a lot more content. So even though I did like Astro Knights, I liked it a little bit less than Aeon's End. I think that makes it very easy for me to, get rid of it. So I do plan on playing, like I said, the various elements of the game and kind of getting what I can out of it. And then I think it's going to be leaving my collection. But for someone who's just looking at this, who doesn't have Aeon's End, I give it a 7.5. You may like it even more. It's a really solid game, a really solid design. We had a lot of fun playing it. Now, we also played Bärenpark, and that was the first time that I've ever played Bärenpark. And Bärenpark is a rather light tile playing game where you've got a little home board with some icons on it. And every turn, you're going to be placing a tile on your little board. And when you cover up certain icons, you'll be able to get more tiles of that type. And if you cover up a construction icon, you'll get a new board. And you're just fitting these tiles on this board. You're building your own Bärenpark. You got polyominoes, kind of like Tetris pieces. And I will say the game's a little light for my taste, and that's why I'm only going to rate it a 7.0. But I will say that the design on it is tight. And we had a lot of fun playing it, and there's a lot of variability in the game too. There are a lot of different pieces that can come out. There are some goal-scoring tiles, and there are different goal-scoring tiles. So it feels like to me that this game has a lot in the box, a lot of variability, and I think if you like lighter games and tile placement games, this could be a huge winner for you. This could be a game for you that scores in the 8s or the 9s. And I almost want to score it higher because I did have a really good time playing with it, and it's just got such a good, tight design, and the gameplay is smooth, it flows really well. But I think that ultimately it's just a little light for my taste, and it's not a game that if I was picking the game, it's not a game that I would be reaching for. I'd rather play something like the Isle of Cats, which also has tile laying, but has more going on with card drafting and just kind of more going on in its complexity. But there's something to be said about a very simple tile laying game that still has really good choices and has a lot of variability baked into the box. So 7.0 for me, but you may like it much more. You may rate it much higher. Now, today I played a solo game of D.E.I. Divide at Impera. That game has a reprint and expansion campaign on Gamefound right now. I just profiled it on, you know, the games that I'm somewhat interested in that are funding this week, and I wanted to give everyone some feedback on my opinions of it, having played it. So I did a solo play today, and I have to say I'm a little disappointed with the gameplay. I'm going to rate this one a 7.0. Now, I will say that the production of it is awesome. I love the tiles on the boards. The meeples are amazing, and if you have the miniatures like I do, they're even more amazing. But whichever version you have, meeples or miniatures, you're going to have a game that looks great. I would also recommend the PVC resources, the plastic resources. They look great. But for all of that production value, there are several boards in the game, some market boards, that are just very, very thin cardstock. And when you compare that to the player boards and some of the other components in the game, it feels lacking. You know, it feels like they cut the corners on some elements of the production of their game. The bigger problem, my bigger problem with the game is threefold, okay? The first problem is that the box itself, the base game, is huge. It's, you know, almost like a double-sized box. If you slide it into a calx, it's going to overhang. And then with the base game, in the original campaign, there were 4 expansion boxes, and each of them is the size of, you know, like a regular game. So the game takes up a lot of shelf space, and that's my second problem with the game. You know, it's kind of simplistic in its gameplay. There's a lot of pieces, and this starts to lead into my third part. But there are a lot of pieces. It takes a lot to set up. There's a lot of components. But when you boil everything down, it's a very simple puzzle. And I feel like this game could have been produced in a way that, you know, capitalizes on that central puzzle more, without all of the pieces, all of the components, all of the setup and teardown time, and all of the huge boxes that take up so much shelf space. Now, there's an expansion campaign going on right now. I've been really tempted to back it. I'm still on the fence just because I really want to like this game, but that's going to be even more boxes. And because the tiles are huge and there's a lot of different components, there's not really any way to condense down those boxes. So it's just a lot of real estate for a game whose gameplay is really not that complex. It kind of bakes down to this simple puzzle. My third problem with the game, however, is there is a solo mode, but you have to have the sort of stretch goals, I think, expansion to play that. But the solo mode can only be used playing against one faction. It's a very specific faction for the solo mode. It's called the Fawns. And you can't play, there's a campaign, like a scenario campaign. You can't play it solo with that, you know, solo AI. So the campaign is only for multiplayer games. And I think this is my third problem with the game, and this is somewhat of a me problem, because I would like to play the game more. I'd like to play the campaign by myself. I'd like to solo the game more and play the campaign in solo mode. You can't do that. Conversely, I know now, having played the solo mode, that a lot of my gaming friends, I don't think are going to be in love with this game. And I think the ones who would maybe be more prone to playing this game are not down for a campaign. And so I think I'm going to be in this weird zone where I'd like to play the campaign solo, but I can't. And I don't think I'm going to be able to find other players who are going to want to play this game, you know, 7, 8, 9 times over a campaign. I might have a few friends that want to play it as a one-off, but they're not going to want to play the campaign. So I almost need the roles reversed. I needed to play the campaign solo and then just concentrate on different, you know, one-offs with friends. So that's a little bit of a me problem. But that means that when you kind of put all those things together, this feels like a game that I may ultimately sell just because I can't play it as I'd like to as a solo game, and I don't think I'm going to get to play it multiplayer all that much, and it takes up so much room. So I'm really on the fence right now about backing the expansion. The only reason that I'm even considering it is the expansion is not that expensive, and since I already have everything else anyway, I'd like to at least try to make my way through as much of the content as possible before I sell it. But I have a feeling it's not going to be a long-term keeper. I will say that I think the people who would enjoy this the most are gaming groups that really dug into Scythe. Like if you liked Scythe and you played that a lot with the same group, I think people who liked Scythe are going to like this. And I think there's enough variability in the game and its various expansions and things that for that kind of group, and a group that wants to play a campaign, multiplayer, I think you're going to have a lot of content. So anyone who liked Scythe, played Scythe a lot, maybe if you had a group and you played through the Fenris campaign, this isn't Legacy, the campaign for this isn't Legacy, but that might be the kind of group that would really like this game. And again, the production, a lot of the production, the tiles, the meeples, the miniatures, it's off the charts. It's just some of the card market boards that are a little thin on the card stock. So this is going to get a 7.0 for me, but I think if you find yourself more in the camp that I'm describing, then again, this could be a game that's 8s or 9s for you. And I know Alex Radcliffe at Board Game Co. loves it, and he's calling it one of his games of the year. So my opinion is by no means something that should be, don't assume that my opinion is for everyone, but just be aware of the elements that I'm talking about and maybe use what I'm saying about those elements to help you make your decision about whether or not this is a game for you. I also got Stardew Valley, the board game, to the table again this period with Kristen, my wife, and we really enjoyed it. That said, I think it may be leaving my collection soon. And the reason for that is we basically played the game on the highest difficulty level, and it takes place over 4 seasons. We barely got into the 4th season and we beat the game. And so Kristen is kind of like, well, we're done with it now. We've won. And so she is the person that I would be playing this with the most. This is a game that I got really to play with her. It's a farming simulation game. It's got, kind of cute art, sort of old school, kind of Final Fantasy style kind of art, but it's a farming game. And if she doesn't want to play it, I don't think I'm going to be playing it with too many other people. And I will say that even though I really enjoy the simplicity of the game and I really enjoyed playing it with her and we had a really good time with it, there is a random element to the game. There are goals that come out, and there aren't that many. There are like 8 goals, and you're going to have 4 in a game. And 2 of those games have a heavy amount of randomization in them. One of them is you have to dig down to the bottom floor of a mine, which is 12 levels deep. The other one is that you have to get 2 of 4 legendary fish that exist out of all the fish tiles in the game. So if you have either one of those goals, or in our tutorial game we had both of them, there's just a lot of doing the same action over and over and over, and you still might not get lucky and you might not be able to achieve those goals because, like with the fishing one, you just might never pull the right tiles from the bag. And with the mining one, you can sort of get yourself boxed into a corner where it's unable for you to get certain resources that you need to move forward. It becomes very difficult in some floors of the mine that randomly come out. So whether you win or lose the game can largely depend on just kind of what happens in terms of the components and the setup and the goal cards, and it has nothing to do with you or the way you play the game. So I think all of that taken into account, even though I really enjoyed playing the game with her and I would play it again happily, and it's very fun for what it is, I just don't think it's a game that is going to get a lot of play, and I think it's a game that needs to move on. Those are the problems, so hopefully you can decide whether this is a game for you and whether this is something you'd want to play over and over and over, knowing that those factors may pop up or not, and your gameplay, you need to find what you're doing in the game fun, I think, win or lose, and also whether or not these random things happen or not. If you enjoy the gameplay of Stardew Valley, you're going to have a fun time with it, and it's very charming. It has a lot of charm to it. But it isn't a deep game in terms of strategy or kind of what's happening, and it's doesn't really have that much variability. Like, they could have put a lot more goal cards in, but your goal cards, the various cards that come up that determine what you need to do to reconstruct certain rooms, there are only a few choices for each of those. So there's just not a lot of variability built into the game. I think it's a rental, you know, not that you can rent board games. Sometimes you can, some places you can from your local library. But I think this is a game that a lot of people, if they like the idea of it, may have a really good time playing it a few times, but it just may not have staying power. So I think the best that I can rate Stardew Valley, the board game, in light of all that, is a 7.0. So, you know, I had fun with it more than maybe a 7.0 would indicate, but based on, you know, those elements of the game, I really kind of just can't give it a higher rating than that, especially if it's a game that I'm going to play a few times and then move out of my collection and, you know, can't really see keeping because of the limitations of the game itself. So 7.0 for a really fun couple of plays, and I think maybe we'll play it once more, and then I think we're probably saying goodbye to Stardew Valley. Bye, Stardew Valley. Okay, I also played Townsfolk Tussle, and I played one fight with Kristen, and then I played a full game session, which includes 4 boss fights, with my friend Ryan over the weekend. And I had some worries about this game because I heard that, well, I had one friend who said the gameplay was garbage, and I'd heard that it just was very dice-based and could be very swingy, and that's all true. Well, not the garbage part, but it is very swingy and it's very based on rolls, dice rolls, and you can get gear that will mitigate some of those dice rolls, but you're not going to build up an invincible character, or a character that can really, you know, power through bad dice rolls. The dice rolls still can take you down. Now, all of that said, I think I'm keeping Townsfolk Tussle, and I'm going to rate it a 7.5 because I really enjoyed it. Even though the gameplay is really repetitive and you can't upgrade the characters that much, I loved the art style. I loved the charm of the game. And 4 boss fights was fine for me. I know there's a campaign out right now for this as well as for D.E.I. And there are 2 new expansions for Townsfolk Tussle, and one of them is a new game mode where instead of doing 4 boss fights, you do 3. And I think that will be better for a lot of people. Now, one of the reasons that I want to keep it in my collection is I think this is a game that I can very easily teach to anyone, non-gamers, very light gamers. And I think there's a lot of charm in the game, and I think things that a lot of people will like and have a good time with. So I think this is a game that I could pull out with a wide group of people and have them really enjoy it. You know who's not going to enjoy it? Heavy gamers, Euro gamers, real hardcore gamers. They're not going to like it because there's that simplicity to it, the repetition, and the randomness of the dice rolls. But it does create this world, and it has this very vintage animation style. And even the way that you interact with the terrain, which is something that you need to do, you need to use the terrain, which is something that I think maybe my friend who called it garbage didn't do. But you have to interact with the terrain to do damage on the bosses because your weapons are oftentimes very weak, and you're at the mercy of the dice rolls. But this terrain that you're interacting with, the bosses, the characters themselves, there is just this vintage retro animation gone wrong charm to it. And you can kind of envision these fights happening as if it was an old cartoon. And some of the things that happen within the fights and certain terrain is just very comical and funny, and it's a blast. I think it's a blast. So my question here is whether or not I back the additional expansions, because they add in more content. They're rather expensive, shipping is expensive, and it's going to take up more shelf space. And quite honestly, for what I think that I may use this game for, which is to play it occasionally with all different kinds of people, I'm not sure I need that extra content. It might even get in the way, having extra characters and extra bosses. but I am a completist by nature, so it's very tempting. But the price tag it really has me on the fence. I'm very much on the fence for both DEI and this one for very different reasons. But I'm going to rate Townsfolk Tussle a 7.5, but keep in mind that there is that randomization, there is the mercy of the dice rolls, there is the swinginess of the game. So if that is something that is going to bother you, if you're a heavy gamer or a Euro gamer who wants not a lot of luck, not a lot of randomness, and things like the art style and the world of the game, the theme, aren't going to charm you past that, then definitely give this one a pass. Okay, the sixth and final game of this period that I played was Valeria Card Kingdoms. And this one is a very light game. You're just, every turn, rolling some dice, activating some cards, getting some resources, maybe strength, magic, money, and then using those to draft other cards. It could be citizens, in which case you'd pay gold, and the citizens then would be used to trigger more dice rolls in the future. It could be monsters, which you'll use strength and or magic to slay. And the monster cards will get you victory points and also some rewards. And it could be some domains. Now the domains are these various lands. They will give you some ongoing powers or some one-time powers, and you have to have certain icons to draft those cards as well as pay money for them. And the icons that you're going to be using to draft those cards are the icons on the citizen cards that you've already drafted. We played the tutorial mode, basically the very easy version of the game, where as a certain number of stacks of cards deplete, they get exhausted cards, and once you hit a certain number of those, 4 in a 2-player game, the game ends. There are many more modes in this game, and there are many expansions, and there's a lot of variability with different cards that you can pull out. And I think for me, this is a game that is very simple, kind of Machi Koro-ish, but there's a lot of fun in this game, and there's a lot of variability in the box. There's a lot of different cards you can put out. You won't always be playing with the same citizen cards. There's different cards that you can have out, different monsters, different domains. There's, you know, different kind of endgame triggers, like additional modes that you can throw in. There's a bunch of different expansions that add in even more things. And I think this one feels like Bärenpark to me in the sense that it's a light game. There's not that much going on gameplay-wise, but what is there works really well and is very well designed. And there is so much variability built into this. This is a game that, and I've got, you know, the big box for it, and it's got like a nice storage tray in it, and everything is in there really well. So this is a game that is much lighter than a game that I would usually bring to the table, but this is not a game that I'm going to be removing from my collection anytime soon, because I think it has so much versatility and so much ease of play, and it's just inherently got so much fun to it. So this one is going to be my third and final 7.5 for the week. Just know, if you like these kinds of light games, if you like Machi Koro, if you like these card drafting games, again, this one could be much higher for you, 8s, 9s, and there is a lot of other additional content out there. So if you like it, and it's a game that you want to play a lot, there are, you know, even other things beyond the various cards that you can throw in from the base game. There are other things that you can go out and purchase to give the game even more variability and more gameplay life. I will be back tomorrow looking at all of the crowdfunding campaigns that launched today on Tuesday. And in that video, I won't have a back half because Tuesday is a bigger day, more launches, and so I'll just be concentrating on those campaigns. Now, at the end of the week, I'll be doing a video on Friday that will look at the campaigns that launched on Wednesday and Thursday. And in that video, I'll be looking ahead in the back half to all of the campaigns that are funding next week. Now I have 5 games that I know I'll be including in the back half of that video. Let's Go to Japan from AEG and designer Josh Wood, who did Cat Lady and Santa Monica and does amazing, great designs of lighter games. Galactic Renaissance, which is the new game in a sort of spiritual trilogy that began with Inish, from the designer of Inish. There's a bunch of moving parts to it, but is a little bit simpler in its setup on the table than something like Inish. It's not a big sprawling dudes on the map game, but it does have plenty of components and planets, and it's space themed and it looks pretty cool. I'll also be talking about Unmatched Adventures, Tales to a Maze, which is the new cooperative mode for Unmatched, which is one of my favorite kind of fighting games. It's a card fighting game. There are so many versions of it out there, and they all come with different fighters, and they all have different decks, and all of the characters fight differently, and they feel different based on the character and the deck. It's just an amazing game, and I'm so looking forward to a cooperative mode for that game. So we'll be looking at that campaign. I'll also be looking at Point City and Deep Dive, which are two new very light games from, I think, Flat Out Games, the publisher Flat Out Games. Point City obviously is a kind of spiritual successor to Point Salad. And then finally, I'll be taking a look at the Last Kingdom board game, which is from the Netflix IP. It's designed by John D. Clare, who did Mystic Vale, Dead Reckoning, Edge of Darkness, and it's being published by Gamelin Games, who does the Tiny Epic games. So it's a really kind of interesting confluence of designer, publisher, and already existing IP. But I think with a designer like John and a publisher like Gamelin Games, you know it's not just some, IP grab. It's going to be a good game. And it looks very much like a Game of Thrones, the board game, but kind of condensed, a little bit smaller. It only runs over 2 rounds. But it's, I think, trying to have that same kind of, dudes on a map, kind of epic warfare experience within 2 rounds. And it does some things differently than a Game of Thrones, the board game. So hopefully within those 2 rounds, there's enough other kind of meat on the bone to make up for the fact that it is, not as long round-wise as some of these bigger dudes on a map games. But those 5 games will be covered in the Friday video. And then next week, when I do the next version of this video, when I talk about my played games a week from now, I know that some of the games that will be included in that video will be D.E.I. again, because I am playing a multiplayer game of that this weekend. So I'll have some more feedback on that, how I feel about the game after having played it multiplayer. And I'm hoping that my opinion of it will, change somewhat, and that I'll like it more. I'm also playing Teledum, so I'll be talking about that. And I probably will get in another couple games over this week. Maybe Flamecraft, and who knows? I don't know what else, but likely another game or 2. So I'll be talking about those games in the played games section of the video 1 week from now. If you're enjoying the content that I'm putting out, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That is the best way to support this channel right now and to help ensure that I continue making content in the future. Thank you for joining me today. As I said, I'll be back again tomorrow with another video. Until then, take care, play lots of great games, and I'll see you very soon.